Everyone. This is an informational hearing on the issuance of a water discharge permit for Williamson Energy at its Pond Creek mine. Let the record reflect the time is now 6:01 p.m. My name is Christine Zeigel, and I am the hearing officer for the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. On behalf of Director John Kim, I welcome you to tonight's hearing, and at this time, please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices if you have not already done so. Okay, as I said, this is an informational hearing before the Illinois EPA in the matter of a renewal of a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, which will be referred to generally as an NPDES or NPDES permit for Williamson Energy's Pond Creek mine located in Franklin and Williamson counties. As part of this hearing proceeding, the Illinois EPA has prepared documents for public review that outline the major permit terms and conditions that are subject to this hearing, and those documents are available for review at the registration desk and also on the Illinois EPA's public notice webpage. The Illinois EPA is holding this hearing for the purpose of accepting comments from the public on the proposed renewal of the NPDES permit for Williamson Energy's Pond Creek mine prior to taking final action on the renewal application. This public hearing is being held under the provisions of the Illinois EPA's procedures for permit and closure plan hearings, which can be found at 35 Illinois Administrative Code, Part 166, Subpart A, which is in accordance with 35 Illinois Administrative Code, Part 309, for public participation in NPDES permit applications. Copies of these procedures can be accessed on the website for the Illinois Pollution Control Board. That website is www.ipcb.state.il.us. Or if you do not have ready access to the internet, they can be obtained from me upon request. An informational public hearing is not a contested case hearing, but rather is meant as an opportunity for you to provide information to and ask questions of the Illinois EPA concerning this specific permit. My responsibility as the hearing officer is to ensure that this proceeding comports with the procedural requirements and is conducted in a proper and fair but efficient manner. Now, I would like to explain how tonight's hearing is going to proceed. First, we will have the Illinois EPA staff located to my right introduce themselves. They will each identify their responsibilities within the agency in regard to the permitting action, and then a few of them will provide you a brief overview of information we believe is relevant to tonight's proceeding. This will be followed by additional instructions from me on how we will be taking oral comments during the hearing this evening, and then the public will be allowed to ask questions and provide comments utilizing the microphone and table located in between the aisle here in front of the panel. We have a court reporter here who is taking a record of these proceedings for the purpose of creating a public record. Therefore, for her benefit, please keep the general background noise in the room to a minimum so that she can hear and properly record everything that is said. Any comments or statements made from the audience without a microphone will not be recorded by the court reporter and will not be located and reported in the transcript. Illinois EPA will post the transcript of this hearing on our webpage in the same general place where the hearing notice and draft permit and other documents associated with this proceeding have been posted. You are not required to provide your comments orally. Written comments are given the same consideration as oral comments made during this hearing and may be submitted to the Illinois EPA at any time during the comment period, which ends January 17, 2020. All comments submitted by mail must be postmarked in sufficient time so as to arrive at the Illinois EPA no later than the closing day of January 17, 2020. Although we will continue to accept comments through that date, tonight is the only time that we will accept oral comments. Any person who wishes to make oral comments may do so as long as the statements are relevant to the issues at hand and the time allows. If you have not completed a registration card at this point, please head to the registration desk and complete a card, making sure to check the appropriate box on the card if you desire to make comments at the hearing this evening. If you have lengthy comments, please consider giving only a summary of those comments at this hearing and then submitting the remainder and entirety of your comments to the agency before the end of the comment period, and I will ensure that they are included in the hearing record. Please keep your comments relevant to the conditions and requirements in the permit. The Illinois EPA is proposing to renew. If your comments fall outside the scope of this hearing, I may ask you to proceed to your next issue. Each speaker will have the option of addressing questions to the Illinois EPA panel located to my right, or making just a general comment, or you can do both. However, since we have a limited time in which to conduct this hearing, Illinois EPA staff members will be responding to issues presented primarily for clarification purposes. We will be available to answer questions if those answers are readily available, but the agency panel may respond by agreeing to defer the response to the responsiveness summary, which will be posted following the close of the comment period. I will not allow speakers to argue, cross-examine, or engage in prolonged dialogue with each other or with members of the panel, and I will also not allow members of the public to address comments to other members of the public. Comments from the public are to be addressed to the hearing panel, located at the front of the room, and the court reporter. We do have representatives of Williamson Energy here tonight, and they will be providing a statement for the record, but they will not be responding directly to questions or issues raised at this hearing tonight. As a hearing officer, I intend to treat everyone in this room in a courteous, respectful, and professional manner, and I ask that members of the panel and the public please do the same. You may disagree with or object to some of the statements and comments that are made here tonight, but this is a public hearing, and everyone has a right to express their comments on this matter. However, I will only allow statements to be made tonight that relate to issues involved with this specific water permit. Statements and comments that are of a personal nature or reflect on the character or motive of a person or group are not appropriate at this hearing. And if statements or comments begin to drift into this area, I may interrupt the person speaking and ask them to move on to their next issue. While the issues tonight may justifiably invoke an emotional response, responsive noises such as applause, jeering, booing, and other responsive noises are also not appropriate. It interferes with the court reporter's ability to create a fair and accurate record of tonight's proceeding, and so I ask that everyone in the audience respect her time and ability to be able to provide a transcript that's accurate for both the benefit of the agency and for the benefit of the public following this hearing. If the conduct of persons attending this hearing should become unruly, I am authorized to adjourn this hearing should the actions warrant, and if that were to happen, the Illinois EPA would still accept written comments through the close of the comment period, which is January 17, 2020. In addition, I'd like to briefly stress that we want to avoid unnecessary repetition. As you can see, we have a full room tonight, and there are many individuals who have indicated their desire to provide comment. So if anyone before you has already presented what is contained in your comments, please skip over those issues when you speak. If someone speaking before you has already said what you desired to say, you can pass when I call your name to come forward. Once a single point is made, it makes no difference if that same point is made once or a dozen times. It will be considered and it will be responded to in the responsiveness summary. Duplicative comments or sentiments will not lend weight to the agency's decision in this matter. All who legibly complete a registration card or submit comments during the comment period will be notified of the final decision in the matter and the availability of the responsiveness summary. In the responsiveness summary, the Illinois EPA will respond to relevant issues that were raised at this hearing or submitted prior to the close of the comment period on January 17, 2020. Again, I will accept those written comments as long as they are received at the Illinois EPA in Springfield by that date. While the record is open, all relevant comments, documents, and data will be placed into the hearing record as exhibits. You can send all written documents to the attention of Barb Lieberoff in the matter as directed in the revised public notice, which is available at the registration desk and on the agency's public notice webpage. The physical mailing address, should you want to submit your comments via mail, is located in that public notice. And if you wanted to send your comments via email, that email address is epa.publichearingcom, that's publichearingcom @illinois.gov. Please include Pine Creek Mine NPDS or the permit number, which is IL 0077666, in the subject line of the email. Again, those addresses are located in the public notice that's available to you at the registration desk or on the webpage. At this time, I'm going to have the Illinois EPA staff present tonight introduce themselves and make a brief statement regarding the permit and tonight's proceeding. Afterwards, they'll return to me and I will provide further instruction on how we will be taking comments during this hearing, and then we will begin taking comments from the public.
Not on. Okay, I'll just go ahead and yell then. My name's Darren LaCrone. I'm the manager of the industrial unit, so I'm the... Can't hear me?
One.
Okay, how about now? Okay, my name's Darren LaCrone. I'm the manager of the industrial unit in the permit section, and so I'm the one whose name's on the draft permit and have the supervisory responsibilities for not only the coal mine permitting but other non-municipal type wastewaters.
My name is Ivana Ward, and I'm a permit review engineer for the agency. I'm responsible for reviewing the coal mining applications and preparation of the coal mining FDS permits.
My name is Scott Twait. I'm the manager of the water quality standards section. I worked on the interdegradation assessment, the mixing zone, which is based on the core mix model, and water quality issues for the NPDS permit.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Deers, and I'm legal counsel for the agency.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Ivana Ward, and I am the permit engineer for the Mine Pollution Control Program for the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. The purpose of this renewal and modified NPDS permit is to regulate surface discharges to the water of the state from the surface facility of the existing underground Pine Creek mine. The surface facilities of this underground mining operation are located on approximately 986 acres and include the drainage control structures, can we turn it up? I will try to speak louder. This is going to be okay? Well, I will try again. The purpose of this renewal and modified NPDS permit is to regulate surface discharges of the water of the state from the surface facilities of the existing underground Pine Creek mine. The surface facilities of this underground mining operation are located on approximately 986 acres and include the drainage control structures, 9 sedimentation basins, and coal preparation plant with a slurry disposal system that is operated as a closed circuit. The surface facilities at this operation also include the coal stockpiles, coal conveyors, a railroad loop, access roads, office, and maintenance buildings. 9 basins with 11 outfalls are identified in NPDES permit, which control runoff from these surface facilities. Receiving waters from the discharges from the facility are identified as Pine Creek and then tributaries to Pine Creek and the Big Muddy River. The following additional changes and modifications have been incorporated into the current NPDES permit. 3 new discharges as out for 09 discharging to the Pan Creek, out for 09 ES discharging to the unnamed tributary to the Pan Creek, and out for 011 discharging to the Big Muddy River. Various mining operation and drainage control plan revisions. About 229 acres incorporated for refuse disposal area number 3, 70.7 acres incorporated for the pipeline to the Big Muddy River, about 145 acres for various IBRs for additional permit area, addition of biannual metals monitoring of discharges from outfalls numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, 9ES and 11, incorporated previous issued Subtitle D permits. Mixing zone to the Big Muddy River is approved with this permit. Excess water will be transported from the Pan Creek mine to outfall number 011 located in the Big Muddy River through the HDP pipeline. Water will be pumped from the water holding cell through approximately 12.5 mile of pipeline to the diffuser located at the mixing zone. The amount of water that could be discharged through the pipeline depends upon the chloride concentration in the discharge stream, the background chloride content, and the flow in the Big Muddy River. Maximum pumping rate is 5,000 gallons per minute from the facility. I would like to thank you everyone for coming this evening and welcome you to the Illinois EPA public hearing. Thank you.
Once again, my name is Scott Twait. I want to provide some background on the mixing zone issue, as the agency has received several comments on this topic. Mixing zones are allowed by the Clean Water Act and board regulations. Mixing zones are a defined area in the receiving stream which allows the discharger to design an effluent structure to mix their effluent with the receiving stream to meet the water quality standards. This facility will have to calculate the chloride concentration at the edge of the mixing zone based on the upstream river flow and upstream chloride concentration and the effluent flow and the effluent chloride concentration. The maximum calculated chloride concentration at the edge of the mixing zone will then have to be reported on the DMR, which is a discharge monitoring report, which is submitted to the agency. Using the equation in special conditions 14 and 16, they can only use 25% of the receiving stream for mixing. The facility will be installing conductivity meters upstream, in the effluent pipe, and downstream of the mixing zone. The conductivity meters will be correlated to the chloride concentration so that the facility will have continuous information of the chloride concentration in the stream, upstream and downstream, and the effluent. In addition to the calculated chloride concentration at the edge of the mixing zone, the facility will be required to install a conductivity meter downstream of the mixing zone that is correlated to the chloride concentration. They will then be required to report the highest chloride concentration correlated to conductivity on the DMRs. This will ensure that the calculations for the mixing zone are being computed correctly and the water quality standard is being met for chlorides downstream of the mixing zone. Also, I wanted to let you know that the company has provided additional information yesterday by email with a paper copy to follow in response to the public comments that have been received. The information that the company provided includes supplemental information concerning the anti-degradation document for Pine Creek Mine, the Big Muddy flood analysis, and modeling of the Big Muddy River chloride dispersion downstream of the proposed mixing zone regarding Pine Creek Mine. The agency has not had time to fully review these materials, but they will be added to the permit record and reviewed in considering comments and revisions to the draft permit. Finally, the agency has received a lot of comments about flooding and has prepared the graphs shown on the easels over here. The first graph is Exhibit 239. The first graph shows that the monthly mean flows of the Big Muddy River for the calendar years of 2005 to 2009 at the Plumfield Station, which is just upstream of the discharge. 2015 to 2019, sorry. This station is a few miles upstream of the proposed discharge location. The graph also shows a straight line at the bottom showing the maximum discharge from the Pond Creek mine of 11.1 CFS. That's cubic feet per second. This is provided to indicate the relative magnitude of the maximum discharge of Pond Creek mine of 11.1 CFS to the monthly mean flow of the Big Muddy River at the upstream gauge station. Please note that the peak monthly mean on this graph is 4,893 CFS. When the Big Muddy River is flowing at this rate, the maximum discharge of the mine, 11.1 CFS, is 0.23% of the flow. Using the peak in 2015 monthly average flow of 2,122 CFS, the maximum discharge of the mine is 0.52% of the flow. The second figure, Exhibit 240, shows the lowest monthly mean for each calendar year of 2015 to 2019, with a comparison to the maximum discharge rate from the Pond Creek mine of 11.1 CFS. This graph shows that there's enough flow during the drier portions of the year for the Big Muddy River to accept effluent and maintain the chloride water quality standard. Thank you for attending this hearing.
I will note that we had someone scheduled to be here tonight from the agency's groundwater division, but she was unable to attend at the last minute due to health reasons. Any questions pertaining specifically to groundwater, which we acknowledge will be present by the comments received to date. Those comments may be addressed in the responsiveness summary and not by tonight's panel. I apologize for the absence of our groundwater division representative tonight. People who have requested to speak will be called upon in the order in which they registered to make a comment. I have that stack of cards here. For the purpose of allowing everyone to have a chance to comment and to ensure that we conduct this hearing in a timely fashion, I'm going to have to impose a time limit of 4 to 5 minutes per speaker. We have had over 50 members of the public indicate their desire to speak tonight, and we'd like to give everybody an opportunity to come to the microphone. If everyone has had an opportunity to speak and we still have time, I may allow those who initially did not desire to speak to come to the microphone, or those who have spoken to speak again if there's additional comments that they weren't able to fit in during their initial time. If we cannot accommodate everyone who desires to speak and make comments this evening, please submit your comments to us in writing. Each comment submitted is received, entered into the hearing record, and addressed in the responsiveness summary. Again, those comments are given the same weight as any comments made orally here tonight. We will start with the first speaker at the microphone, as I said, that's located in the aisleway here, beginning with Clayton Cross on behalf of Williamson with Foresight. Once he begins, or before he begins, I will read the name of the next speaker and ask that you come and stand behind them so that you can approach the microphone as soon as the previous speaker has finished. I recognize that this may be inconvenient for some, but by having you ready behind the speaker who's at the microphone, we'll be able to get people to the microphone quicker and be able to fit in as many speakers tonight as possible. When it is your turn to speak, you should state your name and, if applicable, any governmental body, organization, or association that you represent for the record. If you are not representing a governmental body, an organization, or an association, you may simply indicate that you're a concerned citizen, resident, or member of the public. For the benefit of the court reporter, I ask that you spell your last name. If there are alternate spellings to your first name, and you know who you are, please provide the correct spelling of your first name for the benefit of the court reporter. And once you spell your name, we will start timing and your time period will begin. Mr. Twait referenced two graphs that have been provided today for visual representation. As he referenced, those graphs have been marked as exhibits 239 and 240. If you have questions specific to those graphs or comments specific to those graphs, please reference the exhibit numbers. It makes it much more clear for the transcript and for the agency reviewing the comments later exactly to what you were referencing. Sure, it's exhibit 239 is the graph that's closest to me, and exhibit 240 is the that's farthest away to my left, that shows the minimum mean flow. I ask that while you're speaking, you direct your attention to the hearing panel at the front of the room and to the court reporter to ensure that an accurate record of your comments is made. If you're reading from a prepared statement, please read slowly so that all of your comments can be transcribed by the court reporter. And also, please consider leaving a copy of your prepared remarks for the court reporter. You can just walk up here and provide them to this corner of the table when you're done speaking. That will help make sure that the transcription is as accurate as possible. Before we get started, I would just like you to raise your hand if you cannot hear me, or if you have not been able to hear us to this point. No. Wonderful. As I said, Clayton Cross is with Foresight on behalf of Williamson Energy. Clayton will be giving a statement that's limited to the same period as any other member of the public. And then our next speaker following Clayton, if you wouldn't mind coming behind the microphone, is Claire Killman with Carbondale Spring. You will be up following Clayton's comments.
Good evening. It's on. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello? Okay. Good evening. My name is Clayton Cross. Last name C-R-O-S-S. I'm the Director of Engineering at Foresight and Williamson Energy. Williamson Energy operates one of the safest and most productive mines in the entire world. This is no mistake. Williamson Energy has invested in the best people, best systems, and best equipment to build this coal mine. In all, over $600 million has been invested into this property. We are responsible for employing 194 coal miners directly. Another 283 contractors work supplying, servicing, and performing some other activity for our operation. This means almost 500 families in this area directly depend upon the success of this mine for their livelihood, to pay their mortgages, educate their children, and buy Christmas gifts. Furthermore, every year this mine directly or indirectly generates $78 million in state, county, and local revenues. The economic boost that this mining operation provides to Southern Illinois is very, very significant. Given the extensive coal reserve that we have the rights to mine, this mine could be operating for another 50 years at current production levels. We need this permit renewed to keep this mine open long-term and operating in an environmentally responsible manner while ensuring that our coal miners are not exposed to the unnecessary dangers of excessive water. This mine has operated since 2006, and the purpose of this hearing is to take comments on the IEPA's decision to renew and modify our NPDES permit. Generally, the NPDES permit allows us to discharge water at our mining operation under certain conditions. When we first started this mine in 2006, the mine was very dry, meaning that we had to import almost all of our water for various uses. In other words, the mine didn't make much water. Now, as our mine has expanded for 13 years, we have had to handle an increasing amount of groundwater that is seeping into our mine. This groundwater infiltrating into our underground coal mine presents two main problems for us. First, we have to get it out of the mine because the water has the ability to block our critical ventilation systems or flood escape ways out of the mine, any of which leads to serious risk to our miners. We have to get the water out of the mine. We do this with pumps that bring the water to the surface and pipelines to convey it to our main facilities. This brings me to the second problem. The groundwater that is infiltrating our mine has naturally occurring sulfates and chlorides in it. So one non-technical way to look at it, it's a little bit salty, what you might call brackish water. Again, this little bit of saltiness is naturally occurring in the water. It is not caused by anything that we add or because the water comes into contact with our coal. But because it is relatively salty, we have to deal with it differently than normal water. Historically, we have stored the water in surface ponds or impoundments, but they have limited capacities. We recirculate and use as much of the brackish water as we can on site through various processes, but we still have an excess. So as many of you know, the plan to deal with this problem long-term involves Williamson Energy building 12.5 mile buried pipeline to the Big Muddy River, installing a multi-port diffuser, and tying the diffuser to real-time continuous monitors. All of these elements work together to strategically discharge the water through a mixing zone into a water body that can easily assimilate it without violating the water quality standard. We evaluated other alternatives, reverse osmosis, evaporation, and crystallization, to name a few. But these methods consume a tremendous amount of energy and require the disposal of a concentrated cake to a separate landfill. It is not as simple as filtering the water. The salt is dissolved. This mixing zone is not going to be just an open pipe dumping continuously into the river. There are very specific controls to make sure the discharges are compliant with water quality standards. Water quality standards are adopted and approved by both the U.S. and Illinois EPA based on a rigorous scientific process that result in standards that are conservatively protective of aquatic life. In addition, we have reviewed the aquatic life present in the Big Muddy River in conjunction with academic experts, and they have concluded that our discharges will not adversely impact aquatic life in the Big Muddy River. We will install continuous water quality monitors upstream and downstream of the diffuser or outfall structure. This will give us virtually continuous data on the chloride levels in the receiving water, the Big Muddy River. If we see on these monitors that the Big Muddy is not capable of accepting our water without violating the water quality standard, then we will not discharge. Instead, we will hold the water until the river can receive it without violating the standard. This provides the ability to control the flow so that water quality standards will be met on a continuous basis. Lastly, I wish to address the concern for increasing the flood risk. Our discharge will not have any practically measurable impact to the surface water elevation and to the flood extent. For example, we had a large rain event in this area on October 26th of this past year. It produced nearly 3.5 inches of rain. This is almost equivalent to a 2-year, 24-hour rain event for this area. The Big Muddy River at the Plumfield Bridge monitoring station eventually crested at a height of almost 10 feet, flowing 834 cubic feet per second, which is 374,326 gallons per minute. Again, almost 375,000 gallons per minute. If we were to pump our max capacity of right at 5,000 gallons per minute, our contribution would increase the water elevation at the Route 13 bridge in Murfreesboro by 1.8 millimeters.
Mr. Cross, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Yes, ma'am. And this is equivalent to the thickness of a quarter, so it's not practically measurable. Approving the requested mixing zone is the safest, most environmentally sound, and most effective way for Williamson Energy to manage its excess water to ensure miners' safety and enhance our ability to meet the mandated water quality standards. We are fully committed to operating the system within the legal limits of this permit. This long-term solution will allow our first-class operation to continue and support about 500 local families. Thank you.
If you're providing your comments directly to the court reporter, we'll enter it as Exhibit 241. I believe those comments may have additionally contained pictures of the graphs that are provided to the right of the panel today. Any information you see to the right of the panel has been provided by Williamson and Foresight and are not products of the agency. If you have any questions specific to those graphs, you can reference Exhibit 241 in your questions orally tonight or through your written comments. Claire, you can speak to the microphone, and next up is Thomas Finkenkeller. You'll be up following Claire.
Thank you, Christine. My name is Claire Killman. That's spelled Clarekillman, just for the alternative spelling. Is it okay if I ask a few questions? Okay, this first one's for Christine Ziebel. Is that how you spell it? Ziebel.
Yes.
Okay. Just a point of clarification. Are you all acting as representatives of the EPA currently?
I am an employee of the Illinois EPA, and I have been designated by the director as the agency's hearing officer.
Yeah. Would you consider everyone on this panel to be acting currently in the capacities of like reps of the EPA? Like whatever capacities they're acting?
Everyone is an employee of the Illinois EPA.
Cool. Thank you. Just for video, camera, all that.
Absolutely.
So you're all acting currently as the EPA, like representatives of that organization here today. And that would mean that you'd be able to speak to the ethical considerations of the EPA, as I understand it. This first question is for Mr. Twait. Do you consider humans to be a part of the environment that you're obliged to protect?
Yes, we have human health criteria also.
Do you think it's irresponsible for an EPA official to misrepresent written data and then need to be corrected by their hearing officer in a public hearing?
I provided him clarification because I've seen the written comments beforehand. They were written accurately, but while he was reading, he misspoke. And so I wanted to make sure for the clarity of the record. So it was a mistake, a misspeak, and not a purposeful misrepresentation.
And do you find that to be irresponsible, was the question?
When I read the material, I made a mistake, and she corrected me.
Cool, thank you. This next question is for LeCron, if you don't mind. Just pass the mic. Darren, the definition of a sellout is a betrayal of one's principles for reasons of expedience. And as I understand it, this permit's on your desk, right? So, should you approve this permit, would you consider yourself a sellout and the EPA sellouts, or just on principle?
Ms. Killman, I clarified in my opening comments that remarks of a personal nature that speak to an individual's character or otherwise wouldn't be appropriate for this hearing. We're here to address specifically the technical issues, terms and conditions related to the permit renewal.
Sure.
I ask that you keep your comments specific.
Sure. As I said earlier, that you all are acting as the EPA, right? So maybe this isn't necessarily directed to LeCron as an individual, but more as a representative of the EPA, offering his ethical considerations privy to his position, right?
But comments specific to individuals are not appropriate for this hearing, and your comments
Sure.
need to be directed to the matter of the permit conditions, issues, and questions surrounding the permit itself.
Okay, so if the permit's signed, do you consider yourselves sellouts or just on principle?
Ms. Killman, if you continue with your line of questioning, I'm going to have to move on to the next speaker
Sure,
unless
that's
you
fine.
have another issue that
Okay,
you
okay.
believe is more relevant.
Totally fine to move on. Thanks.
Thomas Finkenkeller, you're up to next to the microphone, and following Thomas, Nick's, and I apologize for any mispronunciations tonight, I'm doing my best, Nick Smaligo? Smaligo? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Finkenkeller. First name Thomas, last name Finkenkeller. I'm a concerned citizen living in Carbondale, Illinois. One of my concerns is about trace effluents from the mine discharges. Looking at a pollutant loading report for Pocket Creek Mine for all the years, for at least 7 years in the past. There was at least 1 year that had incomplete data points, and I want to reiterate, or I want to stress that it must be made clear that it is not just sulfates and chlorides that are important to have complete data on, because there are many other different elements, whether they are aluminum or boron or various transition metals, that can be toxic in relatively low concentrations. And I'd like to stress that the data must always be complete before any permit can be approved. Thank you all.
Nick, you will be up next on the microphone, and following Nick is Keenan Bell Sr.
Okay, hi. My name's Nick Smaligo, S-M-A-L-I-G-O. I feel a bit limited in terms of the ability to speak because there's certain constraints that have been put on the discourse here. One of them, as you said, to focus solely on the permit and the discharge. But the problem is that's connected to a mining operation, and as Mr. Cross said, this is necessary in order to sustain that mining operation. And you all, as members of the EPA, and all of us as environmentally conscious people here who understand that you can't really separate one thing out from the whole that it's a part of. You can for a moment, but if you just focus on that one thing, then you're making an error in your perception. So we can't discuss this and the health of the Big Muddy River, the ecosystems that it's connected to, southern Illinois as a whole, unless we're also thinking about the effect of coal mining on climate change, on the 2 million people who die every year as a result of the burning of coal, fossil fuel. And so it feels very limiting to say, well, we can only focus just on this thing, because these things are connected. And I understand that institutionally, you have to put up certain blinders in order to function within the role that you have as a job, but that's not sufficient for the moment that we're in. Where there are scientists around the globe ringing the alarm bells about human-caused climate change, of which coal burning has had a tremendous contribution to. And we can't, you can't be an environmental protection agency unless you actually consider the ecological crises that we're in. And so it seems to be utterly irresponsible to even consider sustaining this industry which has destroyed the lungs and the land for 100 years in this place. And it's pathetic to see the lackeys of that corporation come up here and give their reasoned arguments within this very narrow window, while the companies that own them have been funding climate change denial for decades, as was recently revealed by Williamson Energy, which went into bankruptcy last month, had to make its records of its political contributions public. So this is a company that is actively obscuring scientific discourse and the ability for us to make an informed decision about how we want to develop in this region and how we can freaking live. And here you are, as members of an environmental protection agency, trying to give them one last chance to sustain this horrible practice for another decade or so in an industry that is in terminal structural decline in this region. It doesn't have a future, and they're trying to take us down with it. Foresight Energy is valued at 8 cents on the stock market as of last week. They're on the verge of bankruptcy, and you're trying to give them a way out here. And when they go on into bankruptcy, by the way, they're going to take all that money and they're going to fuck over their workers. Just like that coal mine did down in Kentucky, where the workers, to their credit, blocked the coal train and eventually won a settlement there. But this is disgusting. And to echo my friend Claire's comments, like the procedure, the idea that we're all just gonna keep it very, very narrow here and not talk about the issues that are actually driving all of us here but to pretend that we're all biologists or chemists. We're not. But we know that this industry can't go on because we've listened to lots and lots of biologists and chemists. And so this is an opportunity for you all to make one tiny dent in the right direction. And rather than permitting the continued destruction of the ecosystems on which the life on this planet depends, right, you can put your foot down and say, no, sorry, Foresight, you're going to have to go into bankruptcy. And you're going to have to shut this mine down. And the rest of us here, especially those families on whose livelihood depend on this mine, we're all going to have to really quick figure out how we are going to live going forward. And that's a question we're all asking. Those families are in the same boat as the rest of us. But right now, we can't keep going down this path. Thank you.
Mr. Keenan Bell, you're up to the microphone, and following Mr. Bell, Mike Ellut, E-L-L-E-T, I believe is your last name, sir. Keenan, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Peace and blessings to everybody here tonight. Thank you for coming out. I didn't know I was coming out, but you know, I'm a member of the universe, and I come here to speak on behalf of all those things who can't speak for themselves, like the wildlife, like the children in your wombs. I mean, it gets really deep. I mean, everybody speaks about going to heaven, right? Everybody talks about going to heaven and hell. But no one understands about the kingdoms of nature first. You have to first respect the earth if you want to respect the earth to respect you. Now, people wonder why there's earthquakes going on all around the world. They wonder why these drastic things are happening. Okay, when you take blood from a human body, what happens? It emerges and dies. That's what's going on with the earthquakes. Okay, I can give you an explanation. All right. First and foremost, I must start over. My name is Keenan Bell Sr. My mother named me. I was born here in Carbondale Memorial Hospital. So that makes me a native here of this area and these lands. And I have a name given by God. I'm Chief Unimo Ben Yahweh. And I speak in the name of Yahweh and his son Yeshua the Christ. Now, the Christ died for all of us. I don't know if you believe in him, and I know this may not be pertinent to this conversation or whatnot, but he's real and he's coming back. And I hate to be doing some drilling or polluting his earth when he comes back. I mean, you guys are bringing a curse upon these lands, don't you see it? 2020 vision, 2020 mad dog, whatever you want to call it. You guys are opening up Pandora's box. Please stop. Because if you don't, then there will be repercussions and those things you guys aren't ready for. I mean, Gaia, Mother Earth, she's real. I mean, she feeds us, she clothes us, she shelters us. I mean, she's everything we need. Why do we continue and insist on destroying her? Why? You ask yourself that question when you go to sleep at night. You know what? It's not about this and that. It's about money. And money is the root of all evil. You talk about all these millions and these billions. Where's this money going to help these homeless people? I'm staying currently in this homeless shelter because I'm a traveler and I didn't know I would be here tonight. But I'm going to wrap this up. I'll tell you this right. Decisions and choices is what molds one's lives. See, your lives can be filled with happiness, or you could be doomed from all your sins and die. Have a blessed night, everybody. And for the record, everybody, if you continue with this, and I'm just a messenger, you will curse yourself and your families. Have a great night.
Mr. Ellut, you're up to the microphone, and following Mike, Lucia Amorelli. Lucia, you'll be up following Mike's comments.
My name is Mike Ellut. Last name is E-L-L-E-T. My credentials are I'm retired as a licensed, under the Department of Health, licensed state plumber. I started my occupation in 1964 in the Air Force as a plumber with the plumbing school. After that, I've come to the apprentice program Got my license. I was in business 45 years. So part of my license fell in the Department of Health. My other part of my license fell under the EPA. I went to the Environmental Resources Training Center, Edwardsville, and become a cross-connection control device inspector, Safe Drinking Water Act. See, we're addressing the Clean Water Act here tonight. Now I'm going to go back a little bit of history why I'm here. I was raised on the Big Muddy River, that direction over there towards Hurst and Bush in a little community called Blairsville. In the early 50s, from 53 to 59, the Big Muddy River was poisoned twice. I don't know if the Scott, under the first name is Scott up there, Clean Water Act, I never knew, I'm not saying the mines done it, but it can happen. What had happened when I say it poisoned, the first time it come down, it was red water, and what I'm saying is, it turned Big Muddy red. And when someone was mentioning earlier the aquatic conditions of the river, it killed everything. All the fish, wild animals, birds. My uncle had livestock. The part of his fencing was the Big Muddy River, so he had to move the livestock away. And then in the latter part of the 50s, probably 58 to 59, here come the green water. When I said the red and the green water, I mean it turned Big Muddy red and green and it killed everything. Now, again, my license fell under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and this is under the Clean Water Act. This can happen. I don't know if records was kept from the EPA or what happened there. It could, again, I'm not saying the mine's done it, but I say it can happen. And, you know, remembering this as a child, we had people in Blairsville that would actually, for commercial fishermen. Back then, for a staple, we didn't have all the money in the world. So these commercial fishermen sold fish to make a living. And myself, probably about 10 years old, I done what we call trout lines. And I got to sell some of my fish to the commercial fishermen and then bring it home and to our family. Not after this. I remember one of the things that, for some reason, stuck in my mind, Blairsville Bridge, 100 yards upstream. And when the water would get low, there'd be an island go out in the middle. And there was actually mussels on the river. Okay? You see that in the oceans and whatever. After that happened, no, there was never no more mussels. And the other thing about this is that back at that time, and I'm kind of curious about that, what happened, is several of the communities along Big Muddy, Ralton, Murfreesboro, Hurst, whatever, that was their water source. So to say that this can't happen, and the monitoring, I think what I've seen in the past, the years that I was a plumber, or worked for the EPA, whatever, the response comes after disaster. And that's why I'm here, and I thank you for my time, okay?
Ms. Amorelli, you'll be up next to the microphone. Following Lucia, George Ellis. Prepare yourself to follow Ms. Amorelli.
Okay, my name is Lucia Amorelli.
Lucia, I apologize for my mispronunciation of your first name.
Amorelli, my last name, Lucia, Lucia. I'm going to bounce them around a little bit, just a couple different topics. First of all, I am from Jackson County. I'm a concerned citizen. I live 5 miles from the Big Muddy River, less than a half a mile to one of the tributaries. I'm an avid hiker, kayaker, swimmer. I swim in these waters, I kayak, I do all kinds of things. That's why I live here. That's why I'm here. I've already submitted 16 pages of comments. I could have written a whole book on the issues and unanswered questions that I hope to get. The first thing I want to address is just for everybody's information, according to information I found on the EPA. Violations, Williamson Energy, between 2015 and 2017, just those 2 years, 45 outfall effluent violations. 2 years. I haven't got the information for the other years. 11 violations for sulfates and 10 for chloride in Palm Creek, which brings me to issues of water quality. You say that we are not going to have problems with water quality, but they're repeatedly violating the standards, okay? So how can the water be safe if they're repeatedly violated? The second issue with water quality, and I'm sure other people will address this further, is that the standards for Illinois are some of the worst standards around. Our neighboring states, so 500 milligrams per liter of chloride for Illinois, but surrounding states, Indiana, Missouri, Iowa, they have 250 milligrams of chloride. That's because the national quality water standard is like at 250 milligrams a liter for chloride, which is what they're saying is the acceptable level for aquatic life. So our standard is 2 times higher, and there could be up to 12,000 milligrams dumped into the river at a time to diffuse. 12,000 milligrams, just to state that. The 2004, the Big Muddy River TDML report states that the Big Muddy River is compromised and impaired. And again, in a 2019 report that just came out, the same thing. The Big Muddy River is already polluted, it's already impaired. In part because of mining operations. It states that, and I quote, abandoned coal mines should be identified in addition to other mining activities which contribute to manganese and sulfate concentrations, which is exactly what the violations are for this company. So my question to the IEPA is, does this mean that the IEPA is going against its own implementation plans by considering granting a permit for a pipeline which will infuse the river with more elevated levels of chloride, sulfates, manganese, and other pollutants? Does this not go against the Clean Water Act? So the IEPA already says the river is polluted, but then they're allowing more pollutants to go in. Why is Pond Creek Mine not included in the draft permit? It's polluted river, polluted tributary. It's not included in the permit. I want to address Scott Twait about mixing zone. You said that they're following the mixing zone, but in section 302.102, allowing mixing, the mixing zones and ZIDSs, number 4. Section 4, mixing is not allowed in waters containing mussel beds, endangered species habitat, fish spawning areas, areas of important aquatic life habitat, or any other national features. My question is, has this been determined by the EPA or IDNR? If there are endangered species, mussel beds, because there's no mention of endangered species anywhere, except for they won't be affected, any species, because the water quality will be met, which is not true because they violate all the time. Second thing for the mixing zones, no mixing is allowed when the water quality standard for the constituent in question is already violated. The water is already violated. Which brings me to what I want to close with. And I have it all on my pages, which I've been sick for a couple of months, primarily probably focusing on this, which is very, very upsetting. And I know someone else is going to be talking about the endangered species. The part I want to bring up that someone might not bring up very quickly is that this section of river is the exact section of river that the NRI, the National Rivers Inventory by the National Park, has listed as an outstanding remarkable value. Just south of Wren Lake, exactly where this pipeline, all the way 52 miles to the Southern Illinois Airport, which is where I live close by. It says that being a wild and scenic candidate river, it's supposed to have protections from government agencies. It says, if an NRI river segment could be affected by the proposed action, an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement needs to be done. My question is, why was there no mention that this is an outstandingly remarkable value designated river? Nowhere. No one's ever mentioned it. Why? It's the exact same section. We have this section of a river, and the EPA doesn't seem to care. I want to finish with that I believe the rivers, and this is starting to become worldwide, this thought, this philosophy, and it should be. Has the EPA considered that the river itself should have its own rights? It's already dammed and polluted. It's dammed to create water for us, to create water for that mine. It's dammed. It already has a pipeline at the sugar camp 12 miles north of this proposed pipeline. It's already being screwed by the stuff that's going to come out of that pipe. And now you're proposing to put another pipeline in it. How much more should the Big Muddy River endure? How dare we as humans treat the river as a toxic dump?
Mr. George Ellis, you're up next to the microphone. Ms. Amorelli, thank you for your comments tonight. We are out of time to be able to answer at this time directly to the questions posed, but they have been recorded by the court reporter for the transcript, and responses will be provided in the agency's responsiveness summary. Mr. Ellis, are you here this evening? You're going to pass? Okay. Tabitha Tripp. Tabitha, if you're here tonight, you're up next to the microphone. Following Tabitha, while she perhaps comes forward, following Tabitha will be Roy Sumner. Is Tabitha Tripp here this evening? Okay. I apologize for the short notice. Roy Sumner, Mr. Sumner, if you're available, you will be following Ms. Tripp at the microphone.
Tabitha Tripp, TRIPP, TABI, THA. I'm with Southern Illinois to Construction or Environment. So I had FOIA'd the EPA office for what had been told to me a complaint had been made. And on first response, we were denied. And finally, on the second response, my wording must have been correct. So in a field inspection report for a compliance sampling dated 8/29/19, the EPA employees spoke to a nearby landowner who said the EPA should take samples on Saturdays or Sundays when the stream is rolling in dark gobbed water. The landowner was advised to then make a formal complaint, to which he responded that the mine had given him such a hard time last time that he didn't want to make a complaint, a formal complaint. So my question to the EPA is, what recourse do citizens have when they see a violation occurring and assume that risk of making a complaint, but yet the polluters are allowed to bully us, the citizens, into silence? If you, as the EPA, are not doing your jobs and enforcing the regulations as they are, and citizens see a violation, they should be protected by you. You should uphold the law and stand with the citizens who are actually doing due diligence and reporting those violations. On 9/3, an IDNR inspector, this is in the same report, it cited in this report saying that he had received similar information from multiple sources about off-hour discharges. Are these off-hour discharges a reoccurring problem with this mine? The same report states that despite the daily influence of approximately 2.7 million gallons of underground water seeping into the mine, There have been no discharges monitoring reports since March of 2019. And that report goes on to say that the water mass balance of influent water and discharge water does not appear consistent. Seems a little weird to me too, that there's 2.7 million gallons going into a mine a day, but nothing was documented coming out. Doesn't add up, does it? Sample results show amounts of sulfides and chlorides greatly exceed the limit of permit water quality standards in this little report that I got. And then the report goes on to say, monitoring violations, the analysis not conducted of discharges, inadequate frequency of sampling, invalid underrepresented samples as required by permit. So I guess what my biggest concern here is that it seems like you've got EPA employees saying one thing, but then when we look at the EPA eco site, it's saying another thing. I thought it was really awkward that I went on the site on Sunday and it said that there were actual violations in a big yellow box on the eco site. And then today I went there and the box had turned blue in 2 days, that there were no violations. So I'm curious what happened in the last 2 days that it went from there were violations cited to no violations. I took screenshots because I was a little baffled that that just happened today. So I'm a little concerned about the transparency that the EPA is sharing. I'm concerned about the authenticity of the information that you're sharing with the public. I'm concerned that there's not adequate monitoring happening. I'm concerned that there's not inspections that are actually documenting what's really going on. And I'm really, really concerned because what happens is when citizens make a complaint, then they're bullied into silence. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable that we don't have any recourse as citizens when we actually stand up and report something. You see something, say something. Isn't that what the cops are always telling us now? Isn't that what they tell us in the airport? You see something, say something. We are. And we're getting bullied. I don't have anything further to say.
Sounds like you
Mr. Sumner, we're going to take just a moment to respond to a few of the points made, and then we'll bring it up to the microphone.
We appreciate all your comments and your concerns. Yes, you're completely right. You know, yes, you should be our eyes in the field, and we all appreciate if you see anything, please report it to us. This is helping us to keep the company and all our environment protected. So I would like to, you provided very many questions, and I would like to answer all of them. I will provide the responses in the summary. All my comments, all my responses in the response in the summary, but one of our one of your questions that I remember was those data did not disappear on the DMRs. On the ecosystem that you've seen one day and another day you have not, it's because we actually reviewed the DMRs also, and we realized that some of them was recorded with the wrong units, was recorded with milligrams per liter versus should be recorded milliliters per liter. That's why some of them actually was not violations. So they were actually mistakenly, it was by our mistake, was wrongly reported to the on the DMRs on the ecosystem.
Any comments from the audience will not be taken by the court reporter and should be reserved for the time at the microphone.
I think one other thing I want to note about, you've talked about the violations that you saw. There's an ecosystem which feeds the US EPA, and then we have ISIS is what IEPA does. So sometimes there's mistakes made at ISIS on our system, or it doesn't get fed in enough time to EPA, so sometimes they cross over. So we do see those instances where you guys are seeing something on ECHO that is not in our ISIS or vice versa. So now that you have raised those issues about compliance issues, numbers that you've seen, we are going back through the DMRs and looking to see if they've reported correctly, if the numbers were correctly, like Ms. Ward mentioned about seeing that some of the parameters weren't reported correctly. So we are definitely looking into that and appreciate you guys raising that information with us.
Okay, Mr. Sumner, if you can come to the microphone, I appreciate your patience. Following Roy's comment, Georgia De Garcia, you will be up following Mr. Sumner.
Hello, I'm Roy Sumner. That's S-U-M-N-E-R. First name's R-O-Y. I had lived on Harvard Lake Road in Murfreesboro for the last 25 years. I'm very close to the Big Muddy River. This last 2019, I think from the end of January till May, the Big Muddy River lapped at the road. Late May into June, it was closed for 2 months. What I've observed in the 25 years I've been out there is that it's more likely to see more frequent flooding that affects my road, and I notice it when I can't get out. And I'm also concerned about the poisons that I mentioned in this water that's going to be discharged. And I haven't seen anything or heard anything so far that makes me comfortable accepting the plan before us. Thank you.
Georgia De La Garza. Georgia spelled like the state. De La Garza is D-E space L-E space capital G-A-R-Z-A. I'm president of Shawnee Hills and Haulers. It's a 501, and I'm also organizer with Big Muddy River Rats over here in Ziegler at the a point where they're going to be expelling these toxins in the water. When I was first called by my home people over here to come and talk to them, I've worked on the front lines on Collins Street now for about 10 years. I put a presentation together, went over there, and the first question I asked them, because I grew up on Big Muddy River. We had a house in town, but my dad wanted us to have that farm experience. So we were raised on our farm on Big Muddy. We had a rope, jumped into the river, swam, learned how to make turtle soup, how to run trout lines, catfish lines, how to canoe, snake identification, abundant amount of bird life, got mussels for soups. There was a lot of creatures and people and community that lived on that river and that still do live on that river and use that river. So the first question I asked them, because I used to throw the pole alongside many of them, was how many people in this room, which was a packed room, fish? Everyone, little kids, moms, grandmas, everybody raised their hand. I said, how many of you lately have seen something wrong with the fish? The livers are enlarged. Their eyes are milky. The gills are messed up. How long has this been going on? Several years now. The mussels have declined substantially. How was I going to tell them that I just had found the permit after looking through the 456 IDNR permit and this permit, looking at the data, looking at some of the science that Sugar Camp Mine had been dumping into Big Muddy River since 2003. So we know that Big Muddy has a substantial amount of this same water that's been being dumped in that river on a daily basis. There are documents that prove that. There are readings that prove that. So we know that if you're going to be dumping and allowing 3.5 million more gallons of water going on top of the, I think it's a 2.6 million, we know what that river is going to look like. We know that whatever aquatic life is there is going to go. We know that our way of life on the river is going to go. And something that you need to consider too is, the Big Muddy is not just a river, it's a major tributary of the Mississippi River. Right now we have our local governments are looking at the issues that we're having on our rivers now. And this is detrimental to that whole Mississippi flow and resiliency that we're looking at as our communities are developing and preparing for these floods that we've been having. looking at climate change. I work with WashU students. I've been doing that for about 7 years. And the last 2 years, we've done a major study. I think the EPA, you guys reached out to us last year to ask us to see that data, which was pretty substantial. It's a lot more than just under 100 violations. There are multiple clustered violations that we have in our areas. I think I was showing some of you some photographs of our water. We've done a lot of aerials here. We are surrounded right now with mercury ponds, aluminum ponds, heavy metal holding ponds. And I want you to take into consideration right now, this is not just about a pipeline going into the river, dumping 3.5 million gallons of toxic water. This is about whole communities that Pond Creek mine is wiping out. You go over to that community, the houses are abandoned, people are being forced out of their homes. You can't farm the land because it's caving in, because that's what longwall mining does. If the coal miners, 194 coal miners, well, let's compare that to the thousands of people in southern Illinois who are being diagnosed with cancer on a daily basis. One of our biggest industries here is healthcare, and it's because of these toxins that are being emitted into the air, making us sick. We have a cancer that is 1 in 28 million diagnosed in the USA. We have 10 clustered cancer a group over here of 10, mostly children, right over in that area, surrounded by these toxins. Take a helicopter, I urge you to go over and say, well, you know, well, the violations we're taking in consideration. Here's our experience when we report violations. We've done this multiple times every year. Groups of students that come in from WashU, Northwest, U of I, whatever, and community members that we organize. We say, if you see something in a violation, of course we have the forms, fill out your violation, we'll submit it to the EPA. We call the office over in Marion, and then we go and we sit and we wait to see how long it takes for someone from the EPA to come out. But guess what happens? The coal mine goes out there and they clean it up really quick. Do they get a phone call? Do they get, hey, get over there and clean it out, we gotta come and check this out. And then a day or two after the coal miners leave, guess what? The EPA comes in and, oh, interesting, we don't see anything. You mean you don't see that 30-foot bench pouring out of a 160-acre impoundment structure going into agriculture? No, it's not there. Well, we have video. So here's the other thing two other points I'm gonna make. Now that we have scientists that work with this, I have 10 of my students that I've worked with, there are hundreds over the last few years, 10 of them are now environmental lawyers. Love it, and they're all ready to work and jump in for us. We have found foundations that will support that effort. So right now, since we know the science, since we know we're working right now, connecting these toxins to our health risk. We've got the data we've worked on for 2 years. We're connecting it with new data that we're compiling and working very hard to get an epidemiology report. And we know, as you know, testing has become very clear right now.
I'm going to have
It's become very clear right now. So when we make those connections, when you sign those permits, you're an accomplice to our murder. You're killing us here. We're dying from this industry. We're dying. It's not about the endangered species anymore. It's about us. I want to say one thing.
You're at 8 minutes, Ms. Taylor Garza.
Praise to you, my Creator, with all your creatures, especially brother, son, who is the day and through whom you give us light. You remember why we're here, where our creation is. Praise to you. Water is life.
Amber Futch. I'm going to have to ask you to sit down, or leave in front of the panel. We need to have other citizens who have an opportunity to speak. I do not want to have to ask you to be escorted from the room, so can you please sit down, ma'am? Thank you.
Good job.
Amber, you're going to get to the microphone. Jan Thomas, you're going to follow. That's very wonderful. Thank you.
Howdy y'all, I'm Amber Futch, Futch spelled F-U-T-C-H. And I didn't grow up around here. I grew up in Tennessee near plastic factories and such, and they were allowed to dump into the Duck River down in Tennessee. And they said they were within the reasonable with the EPA and everything, and we currently in Hickman County, Tennessee do not have viable water source from the Duck River. We have to go out further than the Duck River and get water. My concern is the same thing happening here if this is approved, because people, after working with corporations before, I know they are good at covering up what they do. They lie about their numbers, and that's a huge concern to me. Is it being digitally monitored and sent to you guys, and you guys are seeing it as live? Or is it them reporting it to you? Because people can lie very easily on just a submit, oh, it has to be at this, we'll say it's this, without even checking. And that's a huge concern of mine. Not to mention the way the wildlife is going to be impacted. Every little thing that we do to our environment comes back to us. When they tested Agent Orange in Hickman County, Tennessee, same place I came from, they didn't understand the whole cancer risks with it. Yeah, it got rid of the brush, but at what cost? It killed parts of our environment, and we're still recovering today from it. I may be from a different area, and I may not understand everything that goes into it, but I want to know more information on it, more than what you provided in plain English as well. I seen on there that there would be a minimum amount of mercury allowed into the river, and mercury period is not healthy for river life and or people. That's about all I have to say on the subject.
Ms. Thomas, you'll be next up to the microphone, and following Jan Thomas, Cameron Smith, if you can please be ready to provide your comment.
I'm Jan Thomas, that's Thomas. I live in Murfreesboro. And I would like to talk about a couple of things, and one has already been, very good. One has already been touched on, but basically it is the financial unreliability of this company, which somebody mentioned its stock is worth 8 cents now on the New York Stock Exchange. About 4 years ago, it was worth $17, so as you can see, it's plummeting, and in fact, all of the coal mines in the Illinois basin are projected by the, let's see, that would be the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. They're all going down the tubes, and pretty fast too, because most of this coal goes to electricity generation, which companies are now switching to natural gas, because natural gas is cheap. We're fracking now, which is another whole issue. But a lot of the coal-burning power plants that Foresight Energy supplies throughout the Midwest and the Southeast, a very large percentage of them, according to this article, have indicated that they will be either closing or severely reducing their production as coal burners within the next decade, certainly. So all of this is just financially unsupportable. The Foresight just missed a $24.4 million interest payment at the end of the third quarter of 19, and they have been given so far 2, maybe even we're up to 3 now, extensions from the SEC on paying this, but as a matter of fact, their total debt is like $1.25 billion. And yet we're talking about permitting them to build out an elaborate infrastructure which will keep tying us to dependence on fossil fuel for an indefinite period of time. And they're bragging that they have 50 years worth of coal there. But the planet can't really handle 50 years more of burning coal. In fact, the writing is on the wall. Coal mines are done. And I'm afraid that the coal miners here are going to find themselves in the same state as those ones in Kentucky. Everybody heard about them camping out on the railroad tracks to stop that last shipment of coal from going out because their company was bankrupt and they hadn't been paid. And as a matter of fact, the paychecks they had recently gotten hadn't bounced. So this is not a good financial risk. And by the way, there's not a severance tax on coal in Illinois. And it's been mined here for almost, maybe even for 2 centuries. And there's still no severance tax on it. Every other state in the country has that. Oh, and one more thing in that category, Robert Murray, the CEO of Murray Energy, parent company of Foresight, which just filed for bankruptcy. He took away $14 million when he left, and he also contributed $1 million to climate change denying groups. So these guys are not, the coal miners, I'm very sorry that they're in a stressful position, but we all know they're not really the people who get the money. The money goes to the CEOs. So that's my first point. And my second point, this is really a question. I have not seen anything at all anywhere that a solution to this saline water seeping into the mine from an underground aquifer, why hasn't it been suggested that this saline water could be placed in the depths of the earth with deep injection wells? We all know that the fracking industry does this all the time. And if this were frack water with all the toxic chemicals added in order to make fracking work, and with all the radioactivity and more salty stuff brought up from the deep earth, I would definitely not be advocating this. But the coal miners telling us this water is just salty, so why aren't we asking them to re-inject it in deep injection wells back into the earth? So I think you should deny this permit. Thanks.
You asked the question about why they're not injecting the water. They're currently doing that at their sugar camp mine. They're running it through reverse osmosis and developing a high concentration brine and re-injecting it in deep water wells. And the deep water wells haven't been able to continue to handle the amount of water that's pumped down there. And so it's just not economical for them.
Mr. Smith, you're going to be up next to the microphone with your comments following Cameron Smith, Connie Schmidt.
Just like I'm Cameron Smith, SMITH. I live in Murfreesboro. I'm a SAFE member. I'm also a property owner, and I'm here not to take anybody's job away, but I'm here to protect my property. My wife and I co-own the historic Douglas School of Murfreesboro. The Frederick Douglass School was first built in 1897, way before the building of the Wren Lake Dam. In Murfreesboro, it was Murfreesboro segregated school, and was built next to the Big Muddy, because they were the black kids. Anyway, back in the day when the Big Muddy was a navigable river, they hauled brick and coal down that river. Today, FEMA has classified our building as an AE flood zone. So it's not a matter of if it will flood, it's when it will flood. On May 3rd, 2011, the Big Muddy reached its record high of 40.5 feet above flood stage. And that was at the gauging station on Route 27. At that time, the 127 bridge was closed and underwater. The water was so high you could no longer see the guardrails. And on the side of the river, Route 13 bridge was also being threatened, but it remained open and closely watched by IDOT. During this time, the flood water was so high and so strong that the water was vibrating the bridge. So it was decided by IDOT to rebuild the bridge, to level it and to raise the level of Route 13 bridge. I wonder if IDOT had calculated for this increase of water flow from Pond Creek. This spring, we had standing water on our property for 148 days. I think the gentleman mentioned that. Most of the time, the flood water comes in and goes out as fast as it comes in. But this spring, the water stood there in our yard. And we could see hundreds, if not thousands, of minnows and tadpoles on the water's edge. So I have to wonder what these extra chlorides or sulfates will do to the population. Mr. Cross mentioned that the amount of water at the time that will be released is only 5,000 gallons per minute, or that would be 83 gallons per second, and that would be equivalent of 16 5-gallon buckets coming out of a pipe in 1 second. That sounds like a lot of water to me. But my understanding is the mine will be allowed to increase the water discharge when the big money is high. And I have to wonder what that 1% of increased salty water will do to our historic building. And will the IPA be monitoring how much comes out of that pipe at that time? How much longer will we continue to pollute our water and not care? I asked the IEPA to deny or delay this permit to allow for further study or impact that we'll have for the people in southern Illinois. Thank you.
Give a copy of your comments to the court reporter, right down here in front of me. You can be entered into the record. Connie Schmidt will be up next to the microphone, and following Ms. Schmidt, Galen Thomas, if you can be ready to provide your comment.
Hi, my name is Connie Schmidt, C-O-N-N-I-E. Schmidt is S-C-H-M-I-D-T. Good evening. I serve as the chairperson for the Executive Committee of Sierra Club, the Illinois chapter. We are a big group. I represent 100,000 members and supporters across Illinois. And we are concerned with a clean and healthy environment for all residents of Illinois. This includes clean water, which is what brings me here today. The request by the Pine Creek mine owners for discharge of dirty wastewater carrying high concentrates of chloride and sulfide into the Big Muddy River is ludicrous at best. These pollutants impact aquatic life, both plants and organisms, by altering their ability to reproduce and killing many of them off, thus drastically impacting the ecosystem and all the other species that depend on those life forms, which would include humans. Dumping waste into a natural resource like the Big Muddy is harmful to southern Illinois and beyond. The Big Muddy carries water to the Mississippi eventually, and onto the Gulf of Mexico. This is already an area in serious peril. In addition to the Big Muddy, is very important to humans. It provides tourism, there's commercial and recreational uses of the water, both for visitors and local residents, not to mention the safe haven to countless fish and other species. This area is prone to flooding, so polluting the actual waters of the river would also harm the riparian watershed as well. Endangering these factors is like shooting a healthy resource in the foot. The plan to monitor discharge is flawed at best. The discharge would enter the river at its bed, where contaminants are more difficult to detect. And the entry point is strategically placed downstream of a monitoring system. This river does not have a rock bottom that naturally can act as a filtration. By its very name, we know that mud lines the river basin, trapping pollution within its banks. Even if the pollutants could seep through the river, they would undoubtedly enter an aquifer that would connect to human drinking water at some point. It is just not a good idea to allow pollution into a water source. In conclusion, we ask you, please deny this request to dump dirty wastewater from the mine into any water system, sustaining life for recreation or creatures of our environment. Thank you.